The operating room was a cathedral of controlled atmosphere, chilled to exactly 64 degrees. To the uninitiated, the room might have seemed silent, save for the rhythmic, metronomic beeping of the cardiac monitor and the hydraulic hiss of the ventilator. But to Dr. Sloane Vance, the room was a symphony of microsounds, a chaotic orchestra that she alone could conduct. She heard the friction of the scrub nurse's gown, a synthetic rustle, as she shifted her weight from one foot to the other. She heard the low-frequency hum of the HVAC system circulating sterile air through the vents above, a sound that vibrated at roughly 60 hertz. She heard the wet, slick sound of the retractor pulling back the scalp of the patient on the table, a sound indistinguishable from a boot stepping into mud. "Scalpel," Sloane whispered. Her voice was a cool contralto, smooth and sharp as cut glass. It lacked the nasal quality often associated with the hearing impaired, the telltale slur of someone who cannot monitor their own pitch. Sloane's voice was engineered, a product of years of vocal training and the feedback loop of her own invention. The nurse placed the number 15 blade in her hand. Sloane didn't look up. Her eyes, magnified by custom surgical loops, were fixed on the exposed auditory nerve of a 7-year-old girl named Maya. "Cochlear nerve aplasia," Sloane murmured to the resident standing at her shoulder. "Nature didn't build the bridge. The signal goes into the ear, hits a dead end, and fades. So we will build the bridge for her." Sloane Vance, at 32 years old, was a deity in the high-stakes world of neuro-audiology. She was the architect of the Vance Protocol, a revolutionary method of neural regeneration that combined synthetic biology with aggressive microsurgery. She was wealthy beyond the need for calculation, possessing a penthouse overlooking the Puget Sound and a patent portfolio that generated millions while she slept. Her face had graced the cover of Forbes and The Lancet under the headline, "The Woman Who Healed the World." She made a microscopic incision. The movement was so precise, it barely registered as motion to the naked eye. Her manicure, hidden beneath the latex, was as perfect as her suturing. But as the metal sliced the tissue, a phantom memory overlaid the sterile reality. 22 years ago, her hands had been small, dirty, and trembling. Flashback. The kitchen of the Vance household smelled of lemon cleaner and stale cigarettes. Sloane was 10 years old. She was sitting at the table, a coloring book in front of her, but she wasn't coloring. She was watching. Her mother, Martha, was on the wall-mounted telephone, the cord wrapped around her finger like a snake. Sloane couldn't hear the words. Her world was a silent movie, grainy and confusing. But she had learned to read the shapes. She saw the sharp movements of Martha's lips. Burden, defective, expensive, unmarriageable. Sloane looked across the table at her father, Arthur. He was reading the morning newspaper, a wall of newsprint separating him from his daughter. He lowered the paper slowly. He didn't look at Sloane with hate. Hate would have implied passion. He looked at her with a profound, exhausting indifference. It was the way one looks at a kitchen appliance that has stopped working, an annoyance to be discarded and replaced. "She's broken, Martha," Arthur had whispered to his wife. Sloane couldn't hear the whisper, but he had turned his head, and she saw the shape of the betrayal, the hard, plosive B of broken, the sharp, cutting K. "She's a waste of resources," he continued, his lips forming the terrible geometry of rejection. "Let's start over with a new one, a perfect one." Sloane had looked down at her crayon, gripping it until it snapped. Broken. 2 weeks later, the new one was announced. A pregnancy. The replacement. Lily. And 2 months after Lily was born, a crying, pink, hearing baby, the car ride happened. They drove for 4 hours into the countryside. Sloane remembered the vibration of the engine against her thin legs, a constant shuddering that traveled up her spine. She remembered the smell of her mother's cheap perfume, cloying and thick in the unventilated back seat. They pulled up to a grim brick building with barred windows. St. Jude's State Facility for the Impaired. Martha got out of the car. She handed Sloane a black trash bag. Inside were 3 dresses, a pair of worn sneakers, and a hairbrush. She didn't sign, "I love you." She didn't hug her. She didn't even look back. She got back in the car, and Sloane felt the slam of the door through the soles of her feet. A final, percussive thud that signaled the end of her childhood. She watched the taillights fade into the gray twilight, a red blur, and understood for the first time that silence wasn't just a lack of sound. It was a weapon. It was a sentence. Present day. Suture, Sloane commanded, snapping back to the present. The surgery was over. The neural lace was grafted. Maya would hear her mother's voice in 3 weeks. Sloane stripped off her gloves, the snap of the latex echoing in her ears that were aided by the sleek, invisible implants of her own design. She could hear a pin drop in a storm. She could hear the electricity humming in the walls. She walked to the scrub sink, looking at her reflection in the steel mirror. The dirty girl from St. Jude's was gone. In her place stood a woman in a tailored Givenchy suit, her hair pulled back in a severe, elegant chignon. Her eyes were cold, analytical, and terrifyingly intelligent. She walked to her office on the top floor of the Vance Institute. Her heels clicked rhythmically on the marble floor, a sound of absolute authority. Click, click, click. The sound of a woman who owned the ground she walked on. Her intercom buzzed. It was Mrs. Gable, her secretary, a woman usually unflappable in the face of medical emergencies. Today, her voice trembled. "Dr. Vance?" "Yes, Mrs. Gable." "There are 2 people here. They don't have an appointment. Security tried to turn them away, but they made a scene. They claimed to be family." Sloane froze. Her hand hovered over the volume dial of her console. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "They say it's a medical emergency," Mrs. Gable continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Involving your sister. They said to tell you, the perfect one is failing." Sloane felt a cold spike of adrenaline, sharp as a needle. She turned the frequency of her hearing aids up, tuning into the ambient noise of the waiting room 40 feet down the hall. She heard the nervous tapping of a foot against the carpet. Tap, tap, tap. Arthur. He always tapped when he was losing control. She heard a woman's ragged breathing, wet with tears. "She has to see us, Arthur. Look at this place. It's a palace. She's rich. She owes us." "Keep it down, Martha. She's not the stupid little girl we left behind. We have to be careful. We have to play this right." Sloane closed her eyes. A bitter smile touched her lips. The ghosts of her past hadn't just arrived. They were sitting on her velvet sofa, dissecting her success to see how much they could carve out for themselves. The door to her office slid open with a soft hydraulic hiss. Sloane stood behind her desk, a monolith of black oak and glass. She didn't offer them a seat. She didn't smile. She stood like a statue carved from ice and iron. Arthur and Martha Vance stepped inside. Time had been cruel to them. Arthur was stooped, his hair thin to a few wisps, his belly straining against a cheap polo shirt. The arrogance was still there in his eyes, but it was brittle now, masking the desperation of a man who had peaked 30 years ago. Martha looked worn, her face etched with lines of perpetual dissatisfaction. She wore a floral dress that was trying too hard to look upper class, clutching her handbag to her chest like a shield. They stopped in the middle of the room, dwarfed by the floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased the city Sloane had conquered. They looked at the art on the walls, the view, the suit she wore, calculating the cost of everything. "Sloane?" Martha breathed. She looked at her daughter's face, searching for the 10-year-old girl she had discarded at an orphanage steps. She found only a stranger who looked like a queen. "My God, look at you. You're beautiful. We read about the award in the papers. We knew you'd do well eventually." "No, you didn't," Sloane said. Her voice was calm, clinical, devoid of warmth. It was the voice she used to deliver terminal diagnoses. "You said I was a waste of resources. You left me with $20 and a note signing custody to the state because you didn't want to pay for a tutor." Arthur stepped forward, his jaw jutting out in a familiar, aggressive posture. He tried to summon the authority of a father, but he shrank under her gaze. "Now look here. We did what was best. We were young. We couldn't afford a special needs child. The state had better facilities. We gave you a chance to be with your own kind. And look, it made you tough. It made you a doctor. If we had coddled you, you'd be stocking shelves somewhere." Sloane let out a laugh, a short, sharp sound that was more like a gunshot than an expression of mirth. "You are rewriting history to comfort your conscience, Arthur," she said, stepping around the desk. "You didn't leave me to make me tough. You left me because I embarrassed you. I was a flaw in your perfect picture." She checked her diamond watch. "Why are you here? I have surgeries scheduled. My time is billed at $5,000 an hour. You have used 2 minutes." "It's Lily," Martha sobbed, the facade crumbling instantly. She's fading, Sloane." Sloane leaned back against her desk, crossing her arms. "The perfect one? The replacement?" "She's 22, Martha cried, tears streaking her makeup. "She was top of her class, a violinist, first chair. She's beautiful, Sloane. And then, 6 months ago, she started losing her balance. Then her hearing. Now she's in the ICU at Seattle General. The doctors call it Vance syndrome. Your syndrome." Sloane's eyes narrowed. The genetic defect that had caused her deafness was rare, a recessive mutation. For Lily to have it, and for it to manifest this late and this aggressively, meant it had mutated further. "It's attacking the brainstem," Sloane deduced clinically. "It's not just hearing loss. It's attacking her autonomic functions, breathing, heart rate regulation." "Yes," Arthur said, his voice shaking. "They say she has 3 days, maybe 4. They say the inflammation is too deep." "They say the only person who can operate on that deep a neural level is you. You have the patent on the regeneration tech." "So," Sloane said, walking slowly toward them. She wore 4-inch stilettos that made her tower over her mother. "The golden child is broken, and you want the defective daughter, the waste of resources, to fix her?" "She is your sister, damn it!" Arthur slammed his hand on the desk, the sound exploding in the room. "You owe us! We gave you life!" Sloane stared at his hand. She remembered that hand striking her across the face because she hadn't heard a command to take out the trash. "You gave me biology," Sloane said softly, her voice dropping an octave. "I gave myself a life." She pressed the intercom button on her desk. "Security, escort these people out." "No!" Martha shrieked, falling to her knees. "Sloane, please. She's innocent. She doesn't know what we did to you. She thinks you ran away. She asks about you. She has your picture hidden in her room." Sloane paused. Her finger hovered over the button. "She asks about you." "She dies in 3 days, Sloane." Martha screamed as the security guards entered the room. "Don't punish her for our sins. Don't let her die just to hurt us." "Get them out," Sloane ordered, turning her back on them. But as the heavy doors slid shut, cutting off Martha's wails, Sloane felt the vibration of her mother's words in her chest. That night, Sloane sat in her penthouse, the city lights reflecting in her glass of vintage Pinot Noir. She hadn't turned on the music. She needed to think in the silence she had once feared, but now controlled. The desire for vengeance was a physical weight in her gut, heavy and cold. To let Lily die would be the ultimate destruction of Arthur and Martha. It would take away the only thing they valued, their successful, perfect offspring. It would leave them childless, aging, and broken, exactly as they had left her at the orphanage steps. It was poetic. It was surgical karma. But Sloane Vance was a doctor. She had sworn an oath. First, do no harm. While refusing to operate wasn't technically doing harm, withholding a life-saving cure that only she possessed walked a razor-thin ethical line. She opened her laptop and accessed the secure hospital network. It took her 3 minutes to bypass the firewalls of Seattle General. She pulled up Lily Vance's file. The MRI scans were a nightmare. The neural degradation was severe. Her brainstem was lighting up with inflammation. She was drowning in her own body. She looked at the patient biography. Scholarship student, violinist, volunteer at the shelter for runaway youth. Sloane frowned. Runaway youth. At 2 a.m., Sloane walked into the ICU of Seattle General. She wore a surgical mask and a generic scrub cap. To the night staff, she was just another specialist passing through the shadows. She found room 404. Lily Vance lay intubated, her skin translucent against the white sheets. She was small, fragile. Wires snaked from her chest to the monitors. She looked like a younger, softer version of Sloane. The same high cheekbones, the same brow. But where Sloane was hardened steel, Lily looked like fine porcelain. Sloane stood by the glass wall, watching her. She felt nothing but a cold curiosity. This was the replacement. This was the girl who got the piano lessons, the college fund, the love. Suddenly, Lily's eyes opened. They were green, just like Sloane's. She didn't look confused. Her gaze drifted, found Sloane standing in the shadows, and locked on. She didn't panic. She blinked slowly, fighting the sedation. Then, she lifted her right hand. It was weak, trembling, taped with an IV line. She made a shape. A fist, thumb against the chin. "Sister?" Sloane froze. Her breath hitched in her throat. She stepped closer to the bed, lowering her mask. She raised her manicured hands and signed back, her movements stiff from disuse. "You know sign?" She gave a tiny, tired smile around the intubation tube. Her fingers moved again, slow but practiced. "I learned, in case I found you. Mom and Dad said you died. I found the papers in the attic when I was 16. The adoption rejection letters, the state ward papers." Sloane felt the stone in her chest crack, a fissure running straight through her resolve. "I looked for you," Lily signed. "You are beautiful." Sloane stared at her. She wasn't the golden child. She was just another victim. She had lived in the house of lies that Arthur and Martha had built, and she had seen through the cracks. She had learned a forbidden language just to speak to a ghost. Sloane looked at her vitals. Her heart rate was spiking. She was agitated. "Rest," Sloane signed, her hands softening. "I am here." She watched Lily's eyes close. The anger that had fueled Sloane for 20 years began to transmute into something else, something sharper, colder, and far more dangerous. If she let Lily die, She punished the parents, but she also killed the only person in her bloodline who had ever tried to reach her. If she saved her, she gave Arthur and Martha exactly what they wanted. Unless she changed the terms of the deal. Sloane walked out of the ICU. Arthur and Martha were sleeping in the waiting chairs down the hall, looking pathetic and small. Sloane kicked the leg of Arthur's chair with the point of her heel. Arthur jolted awake, blinking. Martha scrambled up, wiping drool from her cheek. "Sloane?" Arthur stammered. "I'll do it," Sloane said. Hope, sickening and bright, flared in their eyes. "Oh, thank God," Martha wept, reaching out. "Thank God, Sloane." "I will operate at 8 a.m., Sloane said, stepping back. "But there is a fee." "We don't have much money," Arthur stammered, "but we can take a second mortgage." "I don't want your money," Sloane said. She pulled a folded document from her lab coat pocket. She had drafted it on her phone in the elevator and printed it at the nurse's station. "I want this." The gallery above operating room 1 was full. Interns, residents, and department heads from across the state had gathered to watch the famous Dr. Vance perform the Vance Protocol. Down below, the atmosphere was pressurized. "Microscope," Sloane ordered. The surgery was a war. The degradation in Lily's brainstem was worse than the scans showed. It was a tangled mess of necrotic tissue and misfiring neurons. Sloane had to excise the damage and graft the synthetic neural lace, weaving it strand by strand into the biological nerve. 4 hours in, the alarms blared. "BP is dropping.
60/40, the anesthesiologist shouted. "She's bradycardic." "She's stroking out," the assisting surgeon said. "Dr. Vance, we need to abort. If we continue, she dies on the table." "No," Sloane said. Her voice was absolute. Her eyes were locked on the microscope. "Sir, if we continue, she'll be brain dead." "She is already dead if I stop," Sloane snapped. "Push 1 milligram of epinephrine. Cool the blood to 32 degrees. Induce metabolic coma." "That's risky." "Do it!" Sloane roared. The sound shocked the room into obedience. Sloane closed her eyes for a fraction of a second. She remembered the silence of the orphanage, the feeling of being discarded. She looked at the girl on the table, her sister, the only person who had ever heard her, even when she wasn't there. "Stabilize her," Sloane whispered to the universe. "I am not done." She worked with a speed that defied logic. She bypassed the damaged nerves, bridging the gap with her invention. She sutured the dura mater with stitches thinner than human hair. "BP stabilizing," the anesthesiologist breathed, sounding relieved. 90/60, sinus rhythm returning. Sloane didn't celebrate. She finished the closure. She applied the bandages. "Send her to recovery," she said. She stripped off her gown, which was dark with sweat. She walked out to the private waiting room. Arthur and Martha were pacing. They stopped when they saw her. Sloane was covered in sweat, her makeup smudged, looking exhausted, but victorious. "She is alive," Sloane said flatly. "The neural pathways are reconstructed. She will make a full recovery. Her hearing will be better than yours." Martha collapsed into a chair, sobbing with relief. Arthur let out a long, shuddering breath and reached out to shake Sloane's hand. "Thank you, daughter. Thank you. We knew you were special. Look, we can put this behind us. We can be a family again. We can have Sunday dinners. You can teach her whatever it is you do." Sloane looked at her father's hand. She didn't take it. "The condition," Sloane reminded them. Arthur blinked. "Right. The paper you gave us. I didn't really read the fine print. I just signed it so you'd go in." "You should have read it," Sloane said. She held up a copy. "What is it?" Martha asked, wiping her eyes. It is a legally binding transfer of medical power of attorney, Sloane explained, her voice like grinding glass. And a permanent restraining order. The room went silent. What? Arthur whispered. As of the moment anesthesia was administered, I am Lily's legal guardian regarding her health and recovery, Sloane said. And since her condition requires long-term monitoring at my private facility, she will be moving in with me. You can't do that, Martha shrieked, standing up. She's our daughter. She's my baby. You forfeited the title of parents 20 years ago, Sloane said. You threw away the broken child. Now that the perfect child is broken, you don't get to keep her either. We'll sue you, Arthur shouted, stepping forward, his face turning purple. We'll tell the press you kidnapped her. Go ahead, Sloane smiled, a terrifying, cold expression. I have Lily's medical records from her childhood. I have proof of your negligence in seeking early treatment for her symptoms because you didn't want to admit she was imperfect. I will release every detail. I will destroy your reputation, your credit, and your freedom. I have more lawyers on retainer than you have friends. She stepped closer to her father. You wanted to start over with a new one? Now is your chance. You have no children now. Start over. Sloane, Martha pleaded. She's all we have. No, Sloane said. She was all you had. Now, she has a sister. She pointed to the elevator. Goodbye, Arthur. Goodbye, Martha. 2 months later. The terrace of Sloane's penthouse overlooked the shimmering water of the Sound. The wind was brisk, carrying the scent of salt and pine. Lily sat in a wheelchair, wrapped in a thick cashmere blanket. Her hair was growing back, where they had shaved it for the surgery, a soft fuzz of brown. She had a book on neurology, open in her lap. Sloane walked out, carrying 2 mugs of tea. She placed one in Lily's hands. You're reading my book, Sloane noted. It's dense, Lily said. Her voice was raspy, but gaining strength. But I'm starting to understand how you did it. The bridging technique. It's genius, Sloane. It was necessary, Sloane corrected. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. The seagulls cried out overhead. They came by the gate today, Lily said quietly. She didn't look at Sloane. Sloane stiffened. Security turned them away? Yes, but I saw them on the monitor. She took a sip of tea. Mom looked old. Dad looked angry. Do you want to see them? Sloane asked. It was the question she feared most. If Lily wanted to go back, Sloane couldn't stop her. She wouldn't hold her prisoner. Lily looked out at the water. She lifted her hand and signed. They loved the idea of me. They didn't love me. She turned to look at Sloane. When I got sick, they got angry. They acted like I had done it to them on purpose, like I was defective merchandise. Sloane nodded. She knew that look. She knew it intimately. Toxic people are like necrosis, Sloane said, sitting on the railing. You have to cut them out to let the healthy tissue grow. I learned that in surgery. It took me a long time to learn it in life. Thank you, Lily said, for saving me, and for saving me from them. You saved me too, Sloane admitted. How? I lived in a world of sound, Sloane tapped her ear. But it was all just noise. I was listening for validation. I was listening for an apology I was never going to get. She reached out and squeezed her sister's hand. Now, I'm just listening to my family. For the first time in her life, the silence in the room wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. It wasn't the absence of sound, it was the presence of understanding. Sloane realized that while biology makes you a parent, only humanity makes you family. Sloane, Lily said, reaching into her bag, I found something. Before I left the house, before the ambulance came, I raided Mom's safe box. She handed Sloane a yellowed, crinkled envelope. It's from Grandma. She died a year after you left. She didn't know they abandoned you. She thought you were at a boarding school. Sloane took the envelope. She opened it. Inside was a deed. The old farm, Sloane whispered. In the valley? She left it to you, Lily said. Mom and Dad hid it. They couldn't sell it because it was in your name, held in trust until you were 30. Sloane looked at the paper. The farm was where she had lost her hearing, falling from the hayloft. But it was also the only place she remembered being happy, sitting in the tall grass, feeling the hum of the earth. 1 year later. The farm was overgrown. Weeds choked the porch, and the barn roof sagged like a tired shoulder. But the foundation was stone. It was solid. Sloane and Lily stood in the waist-high grass. Lily was walking with a cane now, but she was strong. She was enrolled in the medical program at the University of Washington. It's a wreck, Lily laughed, leaning on her cane. It's a fixer-upper, Sloane corrected. She surveyed the land. She didn't see the rot. She saw the potential. She saw the geometry of restoration. What are we going to do with it? Lily asked. The Vance Institute is too sterile, Sloane said. Kids are scared of it. They need somewhere open, somewhere they can feel the ground under their feet. She turned to her sister. The Vance Center for Auditory Excellence, a clinic and a school, for kids like us, the broken ones. The unfinished ones, Lily corrected, smiling. Yes, Sloane said. The unfinished ones. Sloane took a deep breath. The air here was clean. Her parents had called her stupid. They called her broken. They were wrong. She wasn't broken. She was just a draft they didn't understand how to read. Nature wastes nothing. Decomposition feeds new growth. The trauma they had inflicted on her had become the fuel for her brilliance. The isolation had forced her to listen closer than anyone else. She wasn't a victim of her parents anymore. She was their reckoning. And now, she was their legacy. Not the one they wanted, but the one they deserved. They were alone in a silent house, staring at the walls, while she stood here, surrounded by the wind, the birds, and her sister. She felt her phone vibrate in her pocket. She pulled it out. Unknown number. She knew who it was. It was the third time this week. Arthur. Maybe asking for money, maybe begging for forgiveness. Maybe just wanting to be heard. Sloane looked at the screen. She looked at Lily. Is it them? Lily asked. It's just noise, Sloane said. She pressed the red button. Decline. Then she held the power button down until the screen went black. She put the phone away and turned to her sister. So, she said, rolling up the sleeves of her silk shirt. Where do we start digging? The foundation, Lily signed. The foundation, Sloane agreed. They walked toward the old house together, leaving the silence behind them, ready to build something that would finally, truly, make a sound.